Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and I am so delighted to have award-winning author Josi Kilpack with us today. Hi, Josi. Thanks for joining us.
Connie, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
If you have read any of Josi's work, then you are just as excited to listen to this podcast as I was to get it going and do this today. She is just a gem inside and out. And as I give you kind of more of that formal bio, then I want you to understand and appreciate how connecting and authentic she is. In fact, I had this experience several years ago at a Storymaker conference. It's a big writing conference on the West Coast. And she was up at one of the tables near the front. She was one of the stars. You know, you just don't approach people like that when you're a newbie and a wannabe. And I had a burning question that was just for her. And it was the most wonderful thing. I remember going up to the table and just kind of kneeling next to her, so nervous, but I just said, I just have a question if you don't mind. And she just turned immediately and responded to exactly what I needed and reassured me and wished me luck. And she was absolutely delightful. So that has not changed. That was years ago. And she is still that same genuine, authentic person, even though she is very fated as an author. So we are so happy to have her here. I'm going to give you a quick official bio rundown so you can just see how beautiful and incredible this woman is. And then we're going to jump into what her experience has been as an author, how has that affected her and influenced her, and especially in discovering her purpose as a writer, how that's helped her maybe going through difficult life challenges. So we're going to get into the nitty-gritty in just a second. But first and foremost, she is a multi-published and award-winning author, as I mentioned. She's actually written in a variety of genres. I'm sure you've read some of them. I love Promises and Primroses and Daisy and Devotion. I think that's the title, Daisy and Devotion. Love those. And has actually done that for Shadow Mountain. And then she also publishes women's fiction under Kensington Publishing and under the name Jessica Pack. So if you want to check that out. And she loves to bake and read and travel, which I just love that too. And she does not like to exercise or do yard work. Amen, sister. And so we can really feel a connection to this woman. So let's jump into this whole writing piece, because there's a lot of women out there who want to be a writer or who appreciate good writing. Talk to us about, when did you really know you wanted to be a writer? Kind of just a short version of what happened to you to really go, I think I want to be a writer. I think I can do this.
So for me, I really like all the writer stories about people who set a goal and they work towards it for years and they hit it. And mine came a little bit different. But it's still my story and it still worked. And maybe that's the overall takeaway, is that writing is one of those things that can be approached from a lot of different directions. For me, I never set out to be a writer. I didn't do any writery things in high school or anything like that. I was an avid reader as a teenager, not as a child, but as a teenager I was, and as a young mom. And I played around with my first story when my oldest was just a baby, and it was a Regency romance because I was reading a lot of Regency romance. And I hand wrote it in a notebook, and it really was just me kind of showing off how much I'd learned about the culture during that time. And it wasn't very good. In fact, I've gone back to it a few times thinking, oh, maybe I can fix this. It is a mess. I didn't know anything about point of view or chapter organization or scene or anything like that. So it's awful, but it was fun.
And is it Anne Lamott, I think, is the one that says, there is always one book that will be in the drawer and this will be yours.
Yeah, that will be mine. That will be mine. And then it was a few years after that I ended up on bed rest with a pregnancy. And my sister, who was just wonderful, was coming over every day and taking care of my two littles and managing my house and going to the library and bringing me books, because that was one of the few things I could do. And I started reading, it was kind of a new genre at the time, which was contemporary LDS character-based romance. And it was astounding to me. I loved it because I loved reading romance, and I'd read a lot of the LDS fiction that's out there, but there hadn't been a lot. So this was in the, this was in the late 90s. And so I started writing what I thought would be a short story about an LDS woman who kind of finds herself in her 30s and nothing has turned out the way she expected it to. She felt like she'd made all the right choices, and she was back living at her parents' house and didn't know where her husband was and had her son. And so I started writing this story about a woman whose life was way worse than my own and took some kind of solace in that. But I really was just doing it to entertain my brain and to distract me. Bed rest, if you've ever been on bed rest, you know that it's super fun for 24 hours. And then after that, it's a total drag, and it leaves you ripe for depression and frustration and anger and all of these things. And so writing this story was a way for me to kind of remove myself from the the heaviness of my own life at that time, which granted it was much better than many people's, but it was still hard. And I wrote this story and I loved it. I loved the process. And by the time my son was 6 weeks old, I had written this 300-page book. And I was absolutely amazed with myself. I thought that here I'd been a novel writer all along. I never knew it. Suddenly I'd had this chance and I had written this amazing, perfect novel. I sent it out to the top 3 LDS fiction publishers, actually the only 3 I knew of. And just wondered how I was going to handle it when they all accepted it and they fought over it and I'd feel so bad. And but as it turned out, they all rejected it instead, and it was devastating to me. 2 of the rejections were just form rejections, but the third one was about 3 pages long, and it told me exactly what they didn't like about my book, and I was devastated because I saw it as this thing, that the switch that had been flipped on, you know, and suddenly it wasn't good enough to publish. It was really embarrassing to me. But after I got over the initial embarrassment, I read through that letter again and realized that it was expert advice. I had sent it in, and this person had taken, her name was Valerie Holiday. She's passed away now, but she was a remarkable woman. I had a chance to talk to her a few times years later, but she'd taken the time to teach me what it was I was missing. But a lot of what she talked about, I didn't understand. Like, I didn't understand what exposition was. I didn't understand what pacing was in a novel. But because I'm a reader and that's where I get my information, I went to the library and I checked out books on novel writing and I looked up pacing and exposition and all these things that she had pointed out to me. And I was able to see where those weaknesses were reflected in my story. And so I revised it. And but I didn't think I could send it back to any of those same publishers, which is not true. I could have sent it back to any one of them, and specifically the one who had taken the time to give me the feedback. That is, when you get a rejection like that, that's essentially an invitation to fix it and send it back, but I didn't know that. And so I sent it to a smaller press that I had found, and they accepted it, and I was absolutely thrilled. They called it the Author Participation Program at the time, and so I paid a portion of the publishing for that first book. But I saw that as kind of my stepping stone into this thing that had been so much fun. I had enjoyed this writing. It had been something I wanted in my life. And so there it is.
Did it feel like at that time, did you feel this, okay, I think I can do this? Or were you still like, oh, this is just a fun little hobby. I think I'm just going to throw that out there.
No, it's more like a kind of a fun little hobby. I mean, but also with this naive dose of, you know, I'm going to sell this book and become an eccentric writer and buy a cabin and get a nanny and, you know, all these things. So there's a little of both. It's like I couldn't quite picture what it was going to be, but I was sure excited about the idea and excited to get started.
And so after doing that, I mean, I know as a writer, we all kind of have that moment where we're like, we have the nostalgia, this lens, this, you know, a vision of how it's going to be in a tweed coat and all of that. But then it's this drip system of reality versus keeping that dream alive, right? So
Yeah.
how have you, I always say there is this moment where you go, I'm a writer. That you get that you are a writer, for good, bad, or ugly, right? You just get that that's a part of who you are. How has that helped you in the roller coaster ride of writing? Because it's not a, like you said, get in, write it, make $1 million, and you're a New York Times bestselling author. How is that ability to understand that this is a part of who you are and part of your expression? How has that helped you navigate the ups and downs and the side roads?
Well, that is a great question, because the nice thing about writing is that in a sense, it's kind of a task-oriented thing. You know, I set out to write a book, I finish a book, I can check that off. The book goes into the editing process, and eventually you get this printed book that's finished and done. Life doesn't always give you such clean tasks. But with my writing, every single book I've ever written, every one of them, there's a point in the writing process where I am just like, oh, I have just wasted all my time, and this is the dumbest thing I've ever written. It is an absolute mess. What am I going to do? Here I had this great opportunity. Turns out, you know, all those other books were a fluke. I don't have it. I don't have what it takes to do this. Every book. Now, for some of those books, it lasts a couple of days. For other books, it lasts months, and it's really heavy, and you feel like you're just faking it. But I've learned some tricks. I've learned that for me, it's important that I make myself keep writing, even if it's just doing one thing, even if I sit down and I just change somebody's name, or if I just go and revise a chapter, or if I write a paragraph, or if I write a bit of conversation that's clear in my head. If I keep doing that, eventually I find my groove again, and I figure out where my disconnections are in the story that I need to reconnect in order to have this feel fluid. And I move on, and then that book ends up being published. And then I think I'm never going to feel that way again, because now I've published X number of books, which means I'm never going to face that kind of insecurity. And then I hit it again. And life, I'm not doing the same thing over and over in life, but I have found that a lot of those challenges are kind of the same, where there's going to be those times where it's just like, no, this is never going to work. This is never going to come together. This is an absolute disaster. I've wasted my time, or I've gone the wrong direction, or whatever. But if I can keep with those little tricks, those little things that keep me moving forward and keep me connected and keep me getting out of bed every morning, eventually I'll find those little things that I need to reconnect those broken spots.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. And I love that you bring up that it's you are such a prolific author, and it's been every book.
Every single book.
For people listening, I hope that is heartening to hear, because it's always that, I call it the this is drivel moment, where you're reading it and you're like, who wrote this? This can't be mine, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to, I know sometimes my thing is to just watch movies, like really good movies. And that inspires me to want to write again. But sometimes you just have to like take a break, because you just think, I will never write again. This is ridiculous what I've been doing. So I love that you've shared that is part of the process, and that you've proactively chosen some things to help you move through that. And I think that's a beautiful segue into kind of life. And like you mentioned, life doesn't go A plus B equals C, like the list from the publisher, get this on this date and then do this. And you have to do a gal and you have to do this. But with life, how has the writing helped you in dealing with some challenge? I know you've especially had some recent challenges, and would love to know, how has that helped you being able to face some new things and moving forward in some unexpected ways? How has that helped you?
Well, as I said before, I'm a reader. I'm a natural reader, and when I need information, that's where I go. I go to books, and so I'm towards the tail end, I guess, of a divorce after 27 years. It's been awful, and so it's been really hard. It was something I did not see coming for a very, very long time. And when I realized that was our reality, it was really shocking. Sorry, I don't mean to get emotional, but and so I turned to books. I went on Amazon and I checked out a book on, divorce stories, and I educated myself, and I educated myself on just different people's lives, different people's stories. And that's always been something I've used in my life. When I was raising my kids and it was overwhelming at the different stages, and I realized, I just figured out how to handle a 2-year-old, and now I've got to figure out how to handle a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And all those things, I would turn to books, which in a sense is turning to experts and going to people who know a little bit more than you know. The other thing that has been very helpful in my writing, that's translated into the rest of my life, is I was someone, I didn't grow up expecting to have a lot of friendships as an adult. I struggled with friendships as a kid. It seemed like there was always drama and hard things. And my mom had 9 children, and she had 4 sisters. And so those are the associations I saw with my mom. I didn't see her having girlfriends and spending time with people. She didn't have time. She was a busy, busy lady. But as an adult, through my writing, I met other writers and I collaborated with them. And at first it was about the writing, but a handful of these women have become my closest friends, and they have been amazing, amazing resources for me. And so as my life has gotten complex, they were the people that I could trust with that. And I realized there was a certain safety in being able to talk to people who were not intricately involved with my family and my life. They know me primarily through writing conferences. Of course, they know my family and they know my situation, but they saw me as an individual, as just who I am. And as I really struggled with that identity shift of going from a partnership to a sole proprietorship of your life, I really leaned on them a ton, because they were, you know, of course, sad for me and helpful, but they also had always seen me as just exactly who I am as an individual. And they ended up being a huge resource. And I mean, I called you, there was a day I called you, and you and I had never even spoken on the phone. And I called you because I'm thinking, who do I know who's been through something like this? Because I need some guidance. And I called you, and you gave me excellent advice. And I clung to that. And so those relationships ended up being so important to me, still are. And I can't imagine my life without them now.
I love the point that you make about that, because sometimes, as I've been speaking to women for over 20 years, and one of the biggest comments I get from women is, I don't want to take anything away from my family. So if I write, or if I do photography, or if I paint, I don't want to take away from my family. And what I have shown them from quotes from church leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and other thought leaders out of the best books and life and studies and all of these things, is that we are better women, wives, mothers, sisters, aunts, as we develop who we are divinely designed to be. And as we do that, women, we are wired for connection. And so as we make these connections, just like you're saying, we end up providing ballast to each other in ways that our spouses and families are not able to. And really, for children, that's not their job. So
Right.
we're giving so much all the time that's coming out like an IV, but that's those women friendships and relationships, and those perspectives are just gold, because they bring that living water, that nourishment to us on a daily basis. So I loved that you were able to turn to them. And to me, this shows, just as I've been taking notes, just what you've done all the way along. When something's happened, you've turned to educate yourself, get information that's good and clear and wise, and then make choices to be able to move yourself forward, whether it's been writing or regular life. So I know you've talked about vehicles of personal development. Tell us a little bit about what that is and what that means.
So I've come to realize that, or decide, I don't know, it's my own theory, I suppose. But you know, people talk about what's the purpose of life, and I truly believe that the purpose of our life is to grow, and some people grow a lot, and some people don't grow very much, and sometimes we grow in different directions. But I believe we're here to learn, and we're here to learn through the people we meet, and through the obstacles we face, and through the triumphs that we experience. And the way that we grow is through different vehicles. If you think about, you know, if I have to get from New York to California, how am I going to get there? You know, train, bus, car, Uber, you know, plane, whatever. We have to choose some kind of vehicle, something that's going to move us from one place to the next. And I think our life is full of vehicles that we jump in and out of at different points, and that help take us where it is we want to go, which is ultimately to a better version of ourselves, or if possible, the best version of ourselves. Wouldn't that be nice? But as I look back, I can see that writing, I mean, there's been times when writing felt like the very most important thing I did. And it has always been important, but it also has been important in that it has forced me to also create or remind myself what my priorities are, and to find and develop my own time management and different things like that, so that there was space for it within my life. I have 4 kids. I was the full-time mom while they were growing up. And so it was really busy. And there were times that I resented everything that took me away from my writing. And then there were times when, you know, I resented that I had a deadline that required me to write and get something done, instead of doing something with my family that I would have liked to do. And so there's always been this back and forth. And I used to call it balance. I no longer believe in balance. I think it's the seeking for balance that is the point, not actually achieving it.
I love the point that you bring up about with the family. And I know women listening are thinking that very thing. How did she balance being a mom, and I call it mom and that mom and a writer and a PTA person or whatever, all of those mom ands. And I think you probably were there when Martine Levitt gave the keynote for Storymakers. Powerful. If anybody listening, if you get a chance to go, you can download it, I believe, but go online and find her keynote for Storymakers. I don't remember what year it was, but absolutely. With 2007?
It's 2017.
17. It was just phenomenal. But she talked about, she said, every time I prayed for more time to write, God gave me another child. And she was so frustrated by it. And she has 7 children, and I'm listening to her, and I have 7 children. I was like, I know that feeling. But I love this, the piece that you have to make with the creative driver and then the purpose driver. Both of them are purpose driven, but this purpose driver of being a mom, where you feel it to your core, this highest, noblest calling. And this is the I Ching, this is everything. And yet you're not duct taped to the wall, and it's not helpful if you are to your children. So like this, finding that, seeking that balance. I love that.
Yeah.
Was there something that you felt helped you to keep that better flow? I call it an ebb and flow more than that, but just an ebb and flow. Did you find something that helped you to keep that in a more peaceful ebb and flow?
Not really. I found different things at different times. But I think it was really important for me to always know that my most important job was being a mom. But that doesn't mean that it's my only important job. And I needed that too. And so for me, it was really trying to affect balance all the time. I kind of looking at my family on a week-to-week basis and saying, okay, what are my family needs? And there were times when my family needs meant that I didn't write for weeks. And then things would, we would deal with that fire and things would even out a little bit. And then I could write a little bit more and I could get more of my own stuff done, which was very much, it filled me a lot, but so did my family. But I wrestled with all the guilt, and I wrestled with, I made stupid commitments to things that I missed. I missed my one daughter's 16th birthday and her 18th birthday because I scheduled for different presentations. I missed important things I should have gone to, that in the moment it felt like I'm going to have 100 band concerts. So I end up missing the one where my kid gets an award, for something.
It's like that.
I know, it's like that. But I did learn, one thing I learned early on was that in order for my writing to have space, I needed the support of my family. And that the only way it was fair for me to ask that of them was if I was making sure I supported them in their stuff. So as they got older, I really tried hard to encourage them and to support them in their stuff, and to never make it seem like my writing was more important than their soccer or their dance class or things like that. It meant I wasn't always there, and and they understood that. But when I was there, I tried really hard to be there. And that's when I look back now and I say, okay, so what brought me from who I was at 14 to who I am at 45? And those are where those personal vehicles come in. And writing has been one of those vehicles. It has made me a better person. I have learned a lot. It has helped me learn skills as a writer that have helped me in my regular life. My family has been a personal vehicle, a vehicle to my personal growth. My faith has been a vehicle to my personal growth. All of them have played a part. And I've still got years left. And so there's going to be other vehicles here. I've just recently gotten my real estate license, and I'm jumping in that carriage with the expectation that that's going to be yet another vehicle towards personal growth for me. And I'm nervous and scared and nervous and excited.
And I have no doubt that you are getting expert information and finding your choices and moving forward. It's this beautiful system that you have in play for emotional and tangible things. And I think it's fantastic. I love that you touched on faith just a little bit. Let's talk about that for just a second. With being a writer and then being a mother and a mom, and women listening are struggling with that of how do I move forward, and then my faith, and then when things happen where, wait, I talk to a lot of women who I put 20, 30, 40 years into a marriage and then had things turn out, there was pornography or there was adultery or there was just mental illness or whatever. And they feel like, what happened? I got my personal progress medal, my medallion, right? So what happened? And this feeling of their faith being tried and kind of being rocked, so to speak. How has your faith sustained you through these things? And how has that kind of shifted as you've gone and deepened or blossomed or been broken or whatever it might be? How has that affected your faith journey?
So I was raised, my parents met at BYU. I'm one of 9 children. I was raised in Salt Lake. So, I mean, I have a pretty strong Mormon heritage. And so I grew up going to church and doing all of those things. But when I was about 15, I opted out for a while. I decided I wasn't really interested, that the church was trying to control me. I had a different group of friends and a different group of priorities. And I took some wandering roads that did not lead me to happy places, for which I'm very grateful. A lot of people, it takes them a longer time to get to an unhappy place. For me, it took about 6 months, and I ended up in a very unhappy place. And I ended up making conscious decisions to come back to church and pay attention in a different way. And it allowed me to have a direct experience with the atonement, because I had some stuff I had to repent of. I had some stuff I needed to fix before I could feel comfortable on that path. And that has ended up being a really, really important thing for me, because I'm not a person who has a great deal of spiritual, I don't recognize it. I don't feel it a lot. I don't have a lot of lightning bolt moments. I don't read the scriptures and get a sense of peace. I don't go to the temple and always have these amazing experiences. I ask lots and lots of questions. I have kind of a distrustful nature and a rebellious streak, and those get triggered a lot with church things. And I've gone through phases of wondering, do I even believe this? Am I just too lazy to look somewhere else? And because I know more about this and I'm comfortable here, I'm just staying here. And, but I had a very specific experience with the atonement that I can't talk myself away from. And several years ago, I read a quote by J. Golden Kimball. And if you know who he is, he was a general authority, and he had the mouth of a sailor, and he would give these talks. And I mean, he used language,
very
but he was
colorful.
very colorful, but very upfront. And he has a quote that says, if you're ever lucky enough to have a spiritual experience, for heaven's sakes, write it down. And so I started a journal several years ago where I only write in its spiritual experiences. And for me, they're not big. Most of them aren't big lightning bolts. I think I've had 2 like dreams that I would consider that was something really powerful. But you know, if you do that and you write down that talk that touched you, and you write down this thing your kids said that made you realize that you taught them something important, and just those moments, that time I did go to the temple and I did get an answer, and I write it down. When I end up in those valleys, I go back to that, and I now have a pretty good collection. I've been writing in that for over 20 years, and it's not full. You know, it's again, my spiritual experiences. God requires a lot of faith from me, but I think that's necessary because I look back and I can see that. And so I read through those things and I remember that, yeah, I've had those touches. And so it keeps me moving forward. This last year has been interesting. We thought we were in a good place and we sold our home. We'd been living in the same community for 20 years. So we had raised our kids there. My husband was in the bishopric. I was Young Women's president. We sold our home and we started renting, with the expectation that we were going to buy a home closer to his work. We've been kind of living apart for the last few years. Not a good idea, by the way. But anyway, and just to be clear, there was no covenant breaking in our situation. It's different than that. He's a really good man. So we end up in this whole new ward, and it's a ward that's got condos and apartments. It's very transitory. No one was giving us callings. You know, we were kind of a little bit lost in this ward, which was fine because we'd been really busy in the other ward. And then the bottom fell out of our marriage, and relatively quickly. And it was this huge shock to the system. But this ward has been perfect for me. I told the bishop at Tithing Settlement what had happened. He's the first person I told, and he heard it just the way I needed him to hear it. And he responded just the way I needed him to respond, which was, I trust you guys to handle this. And if you need me, come to me. And in the meantime, you're in our prayers. It was a couple months before he didn't even tell the Relief Society president at that point. He said, I'm going to leave it to you and you just let me know, which was for us exactly what we needed. And it was a couple months before the Relief Society president found out, and she called me on the phone and just said, I'm so sorry to hear it. Can I tell you about my parents' divorce? And I was like, yeah, tell me about your parents' divorce, which was exactly what I needed. And they have been so just kind to me and so accepting of me because it has apartments and things they're used to, just different than the ideal family here. I haven't felt judgment. I haven't felt left out. I've had to put myself forward, but I would have had to do that anywhere. But I've wanted the connections that I have, but I also need the distance that I have.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was remarkable to me because this would have been a much harder experience for me in my last ward, which was wonderful. And I loved and I missed those people, but they saw us all as a unit. And to have that unit break amid that would have been even more difficult for me. But all of this has just softened my faith. I've said for years that I would rather clean the temple than go to a temple session because I get nitpicky and critical. And yet through all of this, it's like, I just want to go. I just want to go. I just want to sit. I want to show God that I'm being obedient. And that softening on my end has made the temple more meaningful. And I've had answers, not every time. There's plenty of times where I'm checking my watch and I'm still like wondering what am I doing? Because I just have a hard time with that automatic spiritual connection that for some people comes really easy, and it just doesn't for me. But as I am being obedient and following those things, I get just enough light through the clouds to remind me that there's power here and there's purpose here, and there's so much I don't understand.
Love that. So beautiful. I love that women listening can feel a different story, a different take of someone who loves God and has a strong faith, and it looks different. It doesn't all have to be cookie cutter. And we hear it, we know that in our mind, but to hear your experience and feel of your strength and your love and see how that plays out. I love your ability to be able to see how life interacts, how you interact with life and how it interacts with you, and how you're being changed and shifted and molded and finessed by it, and interacting and playing with it, rather not playing, but more of you're being integral with it instead of look what happened to me. And I love that, such a piece that's so needed for women right now, instead of feeling that they're being acted upon, that whatever they have that happens, they can act, they can do, they can be proactive, they can get educated, they can make some choices, and they can do something. I love that you shared how you moved into this house and you didn't realize, oh, wow, that's probably wouldn't recommend that, but that God knew what you needed. And so you were able to get the very things you needed in an unusual way.
Yeah.
Just so beautiful.
I thought that's what I needed. I mean, but I also didn't know this was coming, but yeah. And it's been interesting to look back and go, isn't that interesting? I mean, I thought we were coming here on a different step towards a journey together. And it turns out we were coming here as a step on a journey to a future apart. And yet the right people are here. And I have, and I thought we're going to be here for a year. I don't even really need to work to get to know these people, because I mean, I'm just going to be here for just a little while. Well, they ended up being a part of this pivotal moment of my life, and they are stepping up. They've been fantastic.
Oh, that gives me goosebumps. I'm thinking, like a writer, there's a story in there. That's great. And there's a book in there somewhere, right? And just as we're wrapping up here, this has just been glorious and wonderful and so real. I hope the ladies listening can feel that, this candor and this authenticity that is just so beautiful, and you can just sink your teeth into it. If you could go back in time, if you maybe could go back to your teenage self, what would you tell her? What would you give her a heads up on, or what would advice or some thought that you would give her? What would you share?
I've thought about that a lot, because there's been this aspect of, why didn't I know better? Why didn't I know it was coming so I could better prepare? And I've thought that with my writing. I remember when I realized writing was a part of me and that it was opening up these opportunities, I'm like, why couldn't I have known that as a teenage kid who thought she had no talents and no abilities, and just and was seeking this validation through all these wrong directions? Why couldn't have God have told me then that I had something worth pursuing? Well, he didn't. And I figured it out, later on. And I've wondered that with my marriage and with all these things. Why didn't I know? And I look back and I'm like, and I think really the only thing I would change, the only thing I wish I better understood, is I wish I'd been less judgmental of people who didn't have that ideal course. Because I had it for a long time, and it's easy to sit there and think that I did something better, or I did something different, and therefore I earned that. And mostly I'm really proud of the decisions that I made. I don't have any regrets for that. And I like to think that if I knew that it had ended just the way that it's ended, I still would have done everything the same. But I don't know. And what if I didn't? What if I knew it was going to end this way, and so I wasn't as committed, and I didn't work as hard, and I didn't put the time, especially into these last few years? What if knowing the ending had talked me out of what it took to get the result. And so, but I've had to really wrestle with my feelings of being judged and my feelings of being conspicuous. And I've realized that that comes from my own feelings of judgment, my own feelings of, you know, thinking that other people could have done things better or different in their lives to avoid some of their hard things. And I'm really embarrassed by that now. And I've learned that through, not just through this experience, but as I've gotten older. And so if there was one thing I could tell my teenage self, it would be to not get cocky and not be judgmental, and truly understand that even if you're in a wonderful partnership, and even if your family ends up having that ideal, you're on an individual course, you're on an individual journey, and there's going to be things that you're going to have to learn all by yourself, whether you're in a partnership or not. And to be respectful as you look at other people's journeys, to realize they're doing the same thing. And that would have spared me, I think, some of the anguish I felt that I deserved to feel on my own self, as I've had to look at myself and the way that I have looked at other people.
That is absolutely beautiful. And I think we all come to that place. And that's what the human experience is so beautifully designed for, is that we get that compassion. We just don't talk about it or think that we have it or want to get it. But through those life experiences, we actually get that. And we see people in life through a different lens, a better lens. That is one of my, wrapping up, my favorite quotes ever. What if knowing the ending had talked me out of getting the results? I'm going to remember that. That's beautiful. That needs to be in your book.
I remind myself that all the time, because I look ahead and I'm like, well, I just want to know what's going to happen. Just tell me, am I supposed to do this? Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? I've got this whole life to plan. And I have to remind myself, you're already grateful that you didn't know what was coming. So you just have to, I've gotten much better at living in the present, because the past becomes painful and I can't change it, and the future is kind of scary. And so I'm like, all right, what can I do just today?
And I think it makes, just like in writing, you know, there's the plotter and the pantser. And I think a hybrid is always a really great way to go, where you have some structure and then you're in the moment and you see what develops. And I think that's a real metaphor for life, that we get better at being able to, whether we're more fly by the seat of our pants or we're more structured, we end up coming a little bit more to the middle line. And I love the word that you use, it softened my faith. I think that softening is what happens to us as we go through these life experiences, as we fulfill our purpose, as we figure it out, try to figure it out, and the different purposes that come at us, and also being able to know who we are and what we're to do, which is what I talk about with being purpose-filled, that shifts and morphs, and though there's core drivers that stay the same, there's all these appendages that are beautiful, and that it's blooms, it's petals on a flower that are unfolding as we go. And I think as we embrace that, we bring more beauty to ourselves and to others, and we feel the joy of this journey rather than skip to the ending, get to the last page of the book. I just want to know what happened, right?
Yep. I've always been an impatient person, and I look back and I'm like, man, I wish I'd developed this ability sooner, but I didn't. And so now I'm trying to embrace it and really enjoy and try and make the most of just right now, and not get too caught up in the future, and not get too stuck in the past.
Oh, I love it. Josi, what a beautiful time today. If people want more from you, where's the best place for them to go?
They can go to my website, which is josiskilpack.com, and that's got links to my books. It's got links to some articles I've done, some videos and things like that. Yeah, that's probably the best place to go. There's all the first chapters of all my books are posted there, and so there's opportunity to get familiar with my writing. And I'm on Facebook, author Josi Kilpack. I'm on Instagram. So
fantastic. And that's Josi, Josi. Check it out. Love her stuff. I love, especially your Regency. I just soak it in. It's just gorgeous, gorgeous writing. Check that out. And as always, if you want more of these beautiful podcasts, you can subscribe below, rate, review, give me the scoops. You can go to conniesokol.com. You can get all the freebies and downloads. I have my Find Your Purpose Challenge, and you can figure out your purpose and be able to move forward on it. I've got great tools that you can use starting today to move forward on finding and fulfilling your personal purpose. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you, Josi.
Thank you.